Hi, I'm Tristan Beeman from bestwinesonline.com, and we're here at Le Cercle Rive Droite tasting at the wonderful Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. You're wondering, what's Cercle Rive Droite? Well, it means the circle of the right bank, or basically it's producers in the Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, Fronsac, and Costa Castillon region of Bordeaux. Merlot is the base. 2012 is supposedly a Merlot vintage, so we're going to taste the wines and find out. So here we are at Le Cercle Rive Droite, where we've tasted a couple of wines so far, and we're joined by the wine cellar insider's infamous Jeff Leve, and who just got back from Bordeaux, from En Premiere, tasting all the 12s out of barrel. And so, I mean, obviously you had a chance to taste them in Bordeaux. You now probably tasted a few things here. Just give us your opinion of the vintage.
Vintage on a whole, it's classic vintage. The wines wouldn't be, it's not fair to classify it as a bad vintage. It's a classic vintage. The problem with the word classic is classic means different things to different people. If you're European, classic is sought after. If you're an American, it's a euphemism for on ripe. The problem with the vintage is Cabernet Sauvignon did not get ripe. So in the left bank, many of the wines are going to be green, they're going to be hard, they're going to be dry. But the producers on the left bank that had the money, had the wherewithal, had the ability, and stones to actually go out and declassify just an immense amount of their wine, produced nice wines. They're on the left bank in a lighter style. More red fruit than black fruit. They're going to drink well young. On the right bank, it's a slightly different story. Merlot did better. Merlot, especially in Pomerol, was, even though they had drought conditions earlier and they had an uneven flowering and it was a difficult vintage, Merlot was picked before an onset of, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks worth of rains. So the fruits are fresh. It's not super concentrated. Nobody's going to mistake this for 2009, 2010. And I know people have in some ways compared this vintage to 1998. I think 1998 is a better vintage for the right bank. But in Pomerol, there's some really good wines at all ends of the scale. One wine I'm talking about because it's at this tasting, the Cercle Rive Droite, Clos du Clocher. It's fabulous Merlot wine. Really, really good concentration, good levels of fruit, nice amounts of chocolate, nice amounts of licorice, not pricey. There's some other wines in that category that turned out well. Saint-Emilion's more mixed. Sandy soils, some of them next to the Pomerol border, made some nice wines. For example, Corban, which you know, pretty good wine. Producers that probably had a real lot of Cabernet Franc are not as successful as the producers in Saint-Emilion with more Merlot in their wines.
Interesting. Now, we talked earlier, you were saying Cheval was great. I mean, did Cheval cut down on the Cabernet Franc that they normally put in their wine?
From memory, I don't think so, but the vinification was really light. So when you're tasting Cheval Blanc this year, there are really lots of red cherries instead of dark fruits. But the difference is the red cherries are really pure, really clean, really kirsch flavors, really supple. But it's a light vintage of Cheval. another way to classify this vintage, frankly, is it's a drinker's vintage. You buy these wines to drink, and most of them you're going to drink in bottle the day that they're released. You could take these 2012s tonight home and drink them. It's not a vintage for keeping.
Right. So unlikely we're kind of mixing 10s and 12s at this tasting here. The 10s are wines you don't want to drink. Now, for obvious reasons, big tannins, a lot of acidity. The fruit's there, but maybe a little bit on the closed side. And then, wines like Clos de Clocher, a lot of Merlot, really pretty, obviously not too tannic, tannins are very soft, well integrated, maybe, like you said, wines you do want to take home tonight. It's an interesting fact because nobody does better in rough vintages than the Bordelais. These guys, it's like...
The producers that have the money in Bordeaux, and frankly, most of them do, because I know I have a lot less money in my pocket. They have the money. The guys that can make the selection, they're going to produce wine. They're in even a bad vintage, but 12's not what you call a bad vintage. You probably...
would you compare it to maybe like a 2004 in the right vein?
Well, could be. I would probably take a bit of 99, which is drinkable on release. I'd take a bit of 01 because it does improve in the bottle. They're supple textured, they're really nice wines, and they're Merlot based. And then I'd throw in with the Cabernet Sauvignon a little 02 because it's a rare vintage that didn't fully ripen. I think people will end up liking right bank wines better than what most of the tasters are going to say. The reason is conditions that you asked me about earlier during the tastings were poor. It was cold, it was wet, it was rainy. Those kind of temperatures keep aromatics down, keep flavors down, and keep people's moods down. People that tasted maybe before the premieres or after enjoyed a much better tasting. And I think they'll like those wines. But frankly, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what they charge.
And this is the $64,000 question. Now, of course, there are some that have released their prices, and quite honestly, it's not. I'm not completely sticker shocked. I would like to see them come down a little bit more. I think that would get maybe the U.S. consumers a little bit more, maybe a little bit more rambunctious to buy the wines. But so far, I think it's still ho-hum. I think maybe, like we talked earlier, maybe Rose en Saigle. From what I heard, a very well-made wine, and the price is very aggressive. I think a lot of more people have to start going after that, that price point. I think another person who came out was Helen Garcin with Aubergé at €12.50. That was an amazing price. I haven't tasted the wine. I'm going to taste it tomorrow, actually.
Not to pump Helen Garcin, but her wines are always a good deal. Her wines represent what's great about Bordeaux value. And while a lot of people slam Bordeaux, and rightly so, for prices at first growth, which I think, frankly, are too high for most people in one way, and the other way, to be honest, this vintage isn't too high because it's difficult to find older vintages available on the market for less of a first growth of the same quality. But still, the reputation of the first growth has made Bordeaux seem atrociously expensive. Wines like Helen produces, they're fabulous little wines in terroir. They've got great character, great style, and I think they're for sale in the upper $20 bracket. They're fabulous. They age well. They're really, really superb. I'm not sure what this little bottle of Pomerol costs. What do they normally cost?
The Clos de Clocher, when it comes out, it should be in the maybe $30 range.
I'd be surprised if you could buy that for $30. But
no, 30s in, 35, 38.
Less than $50 for any Pomerol of quality is a good deal. It's very difficult to find Pomerols at a reasonable rate because they don't make much. It's in big demand. Fabulous wine, and I really like it. It's great in this vintage, and not just this, but some of the small wines. Rouget turned out really well. what is it, of Raycroix de Gay. I thought best wine they've ever made. They changed consultants this year. Alain Renault has a nice touch on the wine. Really, really good stuff for not much money.
Yeah, I mean, Alain Renault has a nice touch on most of the wines he does. Obviously, he does the Garçon wines, Bordeaux, Rouget, and Clos L'église, etc., etc. Interesting. So now we have another wine here, basically Saint-Emilion. So another right bank wine, but this wine is on the cote. So this is more limestone. I'm curious, some of the wines that you tasted: Pavie, Larcis Ducasse, Beaujeu-Burcot, Beaujeu-Dufaux. The wines that are located on the cote. I mean, were they?
Most of them were really good. Beaujeu-Dufaux, again, since Nicolas Tierpont and Duranoncourt started making those wines, they are on fire. They are on a roll. They're just prohibitively expensive in 010, but I think that wine's one of the wines of the vintage, one of the wines of your life. When you put it in that perspective, maybe it's not that expensive. They make productions like 800 cases. There's 20-something family members. They keep a large part of it, so there isn't much wine. And in 12, those wines are spectacular. I'm sure they're going to be less than 11. And 11 was $75?
Yeah.
If that wine is available for $75, let alone less, wine is stunning. One of the top wines people should buy. This is also, Magrez Fromage is also another wine that's just really successful in this vintage, but it's pricey. I don't know what current vintages are costing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a wine that's just completely all over the board for price-wise. I mean, you can have a Magrez Fromage that's priced around $75, or you have Magrez Fromage that's priced at $150, $175. So I would imagine, Bernard is a smart businessman, that he's not going to come out with a wine like this and price it at €100. It just won't happen. So I think this wine could be sold, could be had for under $100. Jeff, thank you, my friend.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, get a little insight. I guess we'll be hanging out at Vin Expo together. So,
are you going over?
I am going over. Yeah. So I'll taste a little bit more when I'm over there. So anyway, we're signing out. Thank you very much. I just tasted 2012 Right Bank wines. I have to say, there are some hits in this vintage, and basically it's Merlot. It's Merlot from sandy soils, basically Pomerol, some of the Saint-Emilion wines. Very good, and I think we're going to find some great values here too. So I actually can't wait to taste the left bank wines, because there you have more Cabernet Sauvignon. That was kind of more of the difficult grape during this vintage, and so that being said, it was I think a very successful tasting, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to come. So anyway, stay tuned. Should be a lot of fun times coming up with the En Primeur campaign, and I'm signing off.